At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Randy, welcome to the show.
Hey, it is fantastic to be on this show. I am excited to be able to have a conversation today. So,
I think it's going to be really interesting. What I'd love for you to do is share. Here's what I find is as I interview different people, I find the most interesting thing that can come up is the journey. Is what is the background? What brought you to the point that you are? What brought you to write the book that you did? And then we'll get into all of the other aspects of the book and what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, my journey begins when I was younger. I had an interesting, really inquisitive mind. And so I go back to a time when it was just me and one of my best friends. And I'm reminded of a time when we would just go in his backyard and we would just create. And I loved to create all kinds of contraptions. So I'd say, hey, do you have the rope? Do you have the tarp? Do you have the tape? We're gathering all of that stuff together. And sometimes I would come up with great ideas and I would say, hey, can you help me put this together? And he would be like, yeah. And we both would get together and come up with these great ideas and say, yeah, we're going to put this together and we're going to make this. And whether it was the world of Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever it was, we were creating that in his backyard. We would do this day in and day out. His mom would always have us put it all back before night just so that she would have a backyard. But I did find during that time that I really enjoyed coming up with these great ideas and actually having somebody else, if they could do the work, I would love for them to do that. And so that brought me down a path of saying, in this life, what is up here in this imagination in our mind? How can that sometimes become reality in what we do? And so throughout my journey of going to school, I wanted to be able to live life in a great way, enjoyable way. And so, go through school, learn as much as you can, figure out ways to be able to say, hey, how can these creative things become real in this world? And so that brought me to, going through college and figuring things out. And I ended up doing computers and programming and creating on that side of creating enterprise systems and working that out. But I was still curious about life. So I definitely ended up with a place where I said, I'm a minister. I want to learn what the Word of God and some of these other things that are in my life, what do they say for to be able to say, why am I here? What is the reason I'm here? How can I be meaningful and impactful in what I do? So I've done a lot on that side as well. And so I said, well, how can I combine all of this great stuff to say, I have people coming to me as an ordained minister saying, I don't like waking up in the morning. It's not something I'm excited about. And then I said, but that's not how it's supposed to be. We should be able to be joyful every day. We should have some peace in our lives. How can we wake up and give a path for that? And so that put me down a journey to say, you know what, let's write a book that is based on some principles that we can work with, that we can produce in this life, and we can produce on the purpose that we were innately born for. And so combining all of the different things that I do, from a father to a minister to being an author, being one that is doing computers, I bring all of that together to share how you can produce on purpose and experience life being really who you are and who you were born to be. And how can we discover that and then produce a more joyful, fulfilling life?
Oh, that's wonderful. And so as a minister, are you actively doing that, or is work your main thing, or do you do both, or how does that work?
I do both, and it's really fulfilling for me because I believe I like being able to be in multiple spaces, and so it's not just a one vocation, but I do take and share that with others through preaching, teaching, and sharing a good word.
So let me ask you a question. Why are we here?
That is a
Based on your belief and your view,
Mhm.
from your point of view, why are we here? Because I think so many people don't even get a sense of why they're really here.
So I'm going to give a very simple answer first, and then I will go into personally some other pieces I think we can all discover while we're here. I believe we're here to enjoy everything that is here and being provided to us, no matter what it is. So to this experience that we call the human experience, that we are enjoying every moment of it, and that we can be present in the moment of what this is I think the most difficult part that we have to deal with, because sometimes what I've found in my life, and I've heard from others as well, is that sometimes we end up living and we're here right now, but we're not really here. I'm either in the past or I'm living in the future. And both of those aren't real, but what's real is what's happening right now in this moment. And how can I make sure that I'm here at this moment and doing what I need to do? And so the why becomes, how can we impact this world in the relationships that we're talking about, in the moments that we're having? How can I make the most of these moments and be excited about being the best version of myself to impact anything that I'm relating to in this world at all, whether it's people, whether it's items or trees or nature or anything? How can I relate to those in the best way that I can, without pulling in stuff that maybe I have from the past, or even looking to having more anxiety about something in the future? So I
In the
talk about
future.
this in the book. I give two clues to it. Is one is that we all have a general purpose and we all have a specific purpose. General purpose is that you please your creator. If you please your creator, whoever your creator is, whoever you call him, I call my creator God. And so then if I call him God, then God is love in the Bible. So then my expressions of whatever I do, my relationships, I should be expressing love in most of what I do from a general purpose. But then there's a specific purpose, which is unique to every single one of us. Each of us has gifting. We have something that you can do that no one else does very easily. And many times it's people around us that tell us, you are doing this and you do it so easily. That's probably your gifting. Sometimes we can't see it ourselves, and sometimes people tell us about it. And so by putting those two together, a lot of times we can discover why we're here and how we're supposed to impact all of these relationships that we have in this world.
Well, and what comes to my mind is that quote. I think it's in the New Testament. Man is that he might have joy.
Yes.
And, and I think about that and think it isn't that he's saying you're automatically going to have joy. I think, and the other thing where he says, be ye therefore, and in the Bible it says perfect, but when you get to the original meaning of that is to be complete. And so as you talk about, in my mind at least, why we're here is, as you say, to be able to be complete, to experience joy in our lives. And that's not an easy thing, because we're born into this human body that has all sorts of things going on, not only from once we're born into our childhood, but also the DNA memory that we experience from our ancestors that can literally affect our emotions and how we respond to things and how we live. And so for me, I find that that's so interesting that we sometimes get stopped from doing that because, as you say, of those subconscious belief systems, those imprints that get into us that create, I think, to a large degree. And here's where I kind of go against some of the stuff that's being taught, even out of the Bible. The shame, the blame, that is literally coming as a result of some of that. And I'm not sure that that's what was ever meant, but at the same time, it has been created. So how do you work with people as I assume as a minister, you're really becoming not a therapist, but someone who really is there to listen, to consult, to guide. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, that's a part of what you have to do and be able to listen, to be able to share, and to be able to understand that there are these patterns that many times are there. And I like to talk about that balance because sometimes there's a balance between something that may be spiritual, something that may be actually in our soul or mental, and then there are sometimes things that are really in our body that are affecting us as well. And I try to share and listen to what is it that you really need. Because if there's something going on in my body, I know exactly who to go to and quickly get help with. When it starts to become things that are actually maybe truly mental, then I may have more difficulty figuring out who do I need to go to and talk to about this? Because we have professionals to do that as
To
well,
handle
and
that,
there
yes.
should be it should be a relationship and a connection there to be able to help out. And a lot of what I begin to share and be able to really understand when I listen to people is that really they are being locked up by a lot of traumas. What you talk about with the guilt and the shame that may be coming up, things that may be triggering them, whether it's a place, a position, or person they may go into, and they don't understand why the behaviors are coming up in them. And many times it's just what's been going on, and they're playing that same program or whatever they've been doing every single time that comes up. And the thing that I end up talking to most people about is forgiveness or letting go. So I talk about that because when we can begin to think about some of the attachments that we have, some of the issues that we begin to have in our lives, it all starts to spawn back to something that we have started to really connect with or have attached to. And it's just as easy as learning how the process is to begin letting go, forgiving, whether it's yourself, forgiving others, or just letting go of some of those past things that often really get in our way and cause us to have a lot of the guilt, the shame, the anger that come up. And anger is that second wheel of the emotion that we sometimes don't understand why it's popping up in our lives. So,
Well, and I'm curious as a minister, as an ordained minister, and obviously, we have this whole concept that has come down from wherever, that we were born into original sin. And I'm sorry, but I don't think that's biblical, but somehow it got into the religious aspect of Christianity. Uh, how do you take that? Because I'm sure you come across that if you don't even also believe it yourself, and help people to understand that they are that amazing spiritual child of God, and to eliminate that other stuff that does cause the shame and the blame and all of that. How do you help people to do that? Because I imagine you come across that a lot with your ministry.
I would say, and I begin to talk about this in the book a lot, is the idea of that we were all created and uniquely designed, and that the design is coming from your creator or the source that who has kind of put you here, and that a lot of the things, and I'll go into really a portion of the book that I talk about. We put on these masks, so the masks that we end up wearing, and when I talk about mask, I actually talk about at the beginning of the book, like acting, that we all sometimes show up in different spaces as actors and actresses. And I love actors and actresses, and they're usually the ones on the big billboards, and they're pleasing somebody. They're pleasing typically maybe the person who's watching, but I also found that they are also pleasing the person who wrote the script. And they're actually acting on somebody else's script. And the mask that I get from is coming from the Greeks. The Greeks would put on masks to be able to act in a particular way based
Right.
on their acting and that what they do. And then I talk about also we talk about producing, maybe you're producing a movie called Your Life. And if you're producing this movie that is called Your Life, then maybe you say, well, I'll be the director. Well, the director also, they have more freedom. They can say what shots to do and how to do it. They tell the actors and actresses what to do. But then I really am pushing everyone to be producers. And here's why. The producer is the one that actually brings everything together, brings the resources together. And if you become the producer of your life, then you can start to move away from some of these social norms, some of the things that many people have told you of why you shouldn't be as creative as you really are and as you were innately born to be. We were all born to be creators. We were all
Absolutely.
born just like God had done. When God said, "Let there be light," we can also do very similar things in our lives. And what happens is we have just been in a world, whether it's our environment, whether it's been things that have been around us that we have taken in and we have started to use as if they were masks in our lives. And we're showing up as these different people. And what happened in my life is I got tired of juggling all of these masks. Why can't I just be authentically the real person that I was born to be? And what I found is that the easiest way to start to get there is to begin to strip away some of these social norms, some of these things that are unspoken rules, the things that people tell us and that sometimes they project on us. And it's projections that we receive. And if we receive them, then that's when they affect us and affect our lives. And so when I end up talking to people, whether it's in a biblical way or in a religious institution or someone that's out there that's having issues like that, it becomes that they are believing in something that says that you are less than what you were born to be. And you were born to be more than we all probably even thought we were born to be. And it was just because it was what you were hearing on the news. Maybe you were hearing it from school, even our school systems. And I talk about that in the book as my first time saying I had to conform or I would be punished is one of the things that I remember. And we really need everyone to be these creators, because if everyone would be a producer in their life, we would get so much out of them, out of the impacts that they have for this world. And guess what? We would all be better off if everybody was that better version, not to conform to what everybody else is doing. Because when we're conforming, we're not the happiest versions of ourselves.
Well, and that's right. And I love the analogy of the producer of our lives in the film. And I've heard the movie before, but what comes to my mind as the producer is you literally have the ability to remove some of the scenes that you don't want in that movie. And of course that takes time. You talk about purpose and you talk about the fact that we have that innate purpose, which is generalized, loving, and so forth. And then we find, based on our gifts, we have other purposes. And what I've found is those purposes can change over time. We can move forward and spend years and years and years doing something, and then all of a sudden, whether it's that we have no choice or whether it's that we do choose, that we can move forward into something entirely different and discover that that's our purpose also. What I find interesting, though, is as people think about what am I here for? What am I here to accomplish? So many people that say, all right, I want to affect the world. I want to, I just want to do all of that. And I think to myself, that can become very frustrating unless you're a remarkable individual and get into a remarkable position somehow. That's not real easy. But how important is it if you can just affect one?
When being focused on just affecting the one with who you really are on a consistent basis and stepping through, you mentioned the seasons of life that we have. It's interesting because we're learning this in our lives now, that there are different seasons of our lives and there are different things that we are there. You still have the great gifting that you have, but it may be expressed differently in different seasons of your life. And what's interesting is, we had little children at one point, so we had to do different things while we had them, and it was a lot of time put into that. Now our children are all pretty much grown. We call ourselves bird launchers now because we have only one left in the house, and she's a senior. So
Okay.
We're close. But we've seen a progression of change that has happened and occurred with us as well, that we are able to express our gifts differently as we go through those seasons. So I use that as a way of understanding that there are different seasons that we're going to do different things. And sometimes in our vocation, it's going to be different. You may do a completely different vocation as your different seasons change. And that's really awesome to know that that can happen in our lives. And our focus of only doing one, I always say, if you do one little thing and you do it good, and so if I can affect just one person, that one person may affect others. It doesn't matter. I did what I was supposed to do with the one. And if we keep doing the one and can keep doing it consistently, guess what? You will actually impact many more. And whether it's people, whether it's just the environments that you end up in, you will end up affecting every single one of them in your own unique way.
And oftentimes we have to really have the faith that we're doing that, because sometimes you never know. I mean,
Yes.
I used to teach a class for quite a while in a particular situation. And it was strange that I'd teach the class and then I'd say, I wonder if this affected anyone. I wonder if anybody really got this. And just occasionally, rarely, but occasionally, someone would come and say, wow, that really made a difference in my life. And it's like, okay, it's worth it. But the reality is we don't hear that much, and yet it doesn't change the fact that we are really here to make that difference. One of the things that comes to my mind is, as you were talking, and usually I don't get too much into the scriptures and so forth, but because you're an ordained minister, we're going to have that discussion. One of the things that comes to my mind is, except you're, be born again. And I think everybody interprets that in so many different ways. But what I have found is, as you're talking about what you're talking about in your book and in what we're chatting about here, literally, people can be born again in this life by removing all of that junk that is sitting subconsciously there and creating a different movie for them. We can create an entirely different movie. We can create a movie of joy, of happiness, of laughter, whatever that happens to be, and literally be born again in this life.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think I was told, and maybe it was something when I was in school, I always thought you had to do something new in order to become new. But the more I've learned is that if I let go of some of the things that, in the way that I've been thinking about things or how I've approached different things in my life, I begin to become a new person. And what's interesting, regardless of whether we are intentional about how we change our lives or create in our lives or not, life changes anyways. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gray in my beard and I would probably still have hair on my head, right? So
I wish I had that type of gray in my hair.
So it's interesting to see it and to understand that when we are going through life and we have these changes that are occurring, that we can create by letting go and allowing that to really be a place of a starting place, a seed for us to say, you know what, I am going to create that new movie called my life. And I can't create it by myself. So that's why, producers don't work by themselves. You don't see the producer being the actor, the director, and putting out all the money. No, the producer has to bring all of the right people together to see that life come into place. And so we have people that we're going to need to support us in our life, in what we're doing. And as we're doing that, you are able to renew and change. And I say, now I watch Netflix and all of these different things. Everything has a series. So maybe you're on series 1, I don't know, series 2, but you can have different series, and those different series of your movie, they can be different. And you can continue to be that born again person that is now being more intentional about your purpose, about your impact, how you are sharing with others, and the relationships that you're putting in front, and the priorities that you might have in your life.
Well, and let's talk about the one thing you talked about is the now, because what I have found as I've looked at various religions is that there is particularly when we get into the Eastern side of things, that there is that sense of quit worrying about the past, and as you said, don't have the anxiety about the future. Live in the now. How do you help people to do that?
So there are specific techniques to living in the now that I share in the book, and I practice on a daily basis. Number one is prayer. I will say prayer is the communication within my spirit, within to my source, to my creator. And what I'm also going to do is I separate prayer and meditation. So prayer is initially me voicing, hey, this is where I am at this moment, and being authentic about that and listening to then the next part is listening. Meditation to me is that listening, and that listening becomes a place where I'm going to be in a space where I don't need a whole lot of distractions. I don't need a whole lot going on around me, but I'm going to listen, and I'm going to set aside time to listen. And this has saved me a lot of heartache and a lot of pain in my life, because I'll be like, aha, or I'll understand better that, maybe there is something that I'm supposed to be connected with that I didn't know or do. And so through prayer, meditation, and then another piece that I also share with others is journaling. Journaling has been magnificent for me, because what it has helped me with is it has allowed me to write down, number one, sometimes some of the intentions that may be going on in my life, maybe some of the things that I'm grateful for. I make sure that I do that on a daily basis. And then I can also write down when I've seen synchronicities, I've seen things that have happened in this world that I'm like, oh, wait a minute, and put those aha moments down. And when I go back and I review these on a consistent basis, I learn so much more about who I am, what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to be here. And then being put back into this moment is a space where now I don't have to think about the things that are external to me, that are happening, that are going on, but now I've reached inside and I begin to understand that most of what I've been needing for my entire life doesn't come from the outside. Anything I see on the outside is actually the past anyways. And when I begin to understand that and understand that what's coming from the inside, and if it comes from the inside and then it comes out, that means that even when I'm in any situation, that if I've got joy on the inside, I still have joy, regardless of everything around me could be falling down. I could have a fire around me, but if I got joy on the inside, guess what? I still have joy. And the other way around, most of my life was looking at the outside in. And when you look at the outside and you're looking at those things, it was affecting and changing how I was showing up. And I could not show up fully in the now if I didn't let go of the past and also some of those anxieties in the future. The past would always pretty much put me in sometimes in a depression, be like, either I was saying, man, I want to go back to the good old days, or man, why, this happened last time and it's happening again. I'm like, well, that's not true. And when you start to find the truth, it changes everything.
Well,
So
and
those are a couple of items that I've used in my life.
good. And one thing that comes to my mind, and I do all of that, by the way, except for the journaling. I've never been able to journal because I just have such bad handwriting. But but what I find interesting is we talk about the anxiety of the future and allowing that to create such anxiety, and yet, as you're talking about being the producer of the movie, we are literally looking into the future to create a different life. So how do you help people to balance that out to where, the future is there to create and you can create that future beautiful life? At the same time, don't allow yourselves to get anxious about what's going to happen. How do you help people to balance those two?
It's interesting because we are in this 3D world and we are bound by this thing called time, which we call it time, but is there really time? And there's a lot that we can talk about there. But the biggest thing I will tell anyone in any of these situations is that you already know that you have it if you're connected to your source. Your source has already provided whatever your outcome is. And the idea is that if you understand that that's already the truth, it just hasn't manifested in this 3D world yet, then you can then begin to understand that I don't have to have anxiety about when is something going to show up or how it's going to show up. I just know it will show up. And when you get to that space, and so, some techniques people use like affirmations, you don't have to use that for the rest of your life, but at some point, maybe you have to use that to help feed yourself to be able to get to a space where you understand that the things that you are looking to be and make sure that you are it shouldn't be hard for you to be you. You should be you. But if it's difficult, more than likely you still have something to let go. You got something to release in your life. And when you are you, then you can just show up and you are going to produce the greatest creative things to help. You're going to help others. You're going to serve others. You're going to do things that will just help. And it's amazing because I know no one owes me anything. I just get to show up in this world every single day and make an impact and create. And so I would really impress upon anyone that's thinking about, trying to think of the future in time, to try to not think of your future in time, but think of, what, I already am in those spaces. I can show up now as whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're supposed to be. If it's joyful, you can show up now as that. You don't have to wait for anything to happen to have that. And I believe that most anxiety in anything that we have is you have some type of doubt that it may not occur or something will not happen. And that is what's causing more anxiety about the future than you need. And if you can believe that it's there, it's already there, it's already being provided through your source in your life, that you will see it manifested at some point, that it will be there. Your anxiety goes away. And, this is, I talk about the Bible because, of course, I'm an ordained minister. There's a scripture in the Bible that tells us that you can have peace that's beyond understanding. And it's because you're thinking on specific things. And when you're thinking on those things consistently, you will have peace beyond understanding. And this peace is something that we all can have, that we can all enjoy and experience every single day if we continue to think on those particular things.
Okay, so here's a question. You said something that again struck something in my mind. So, we talk about being a victim to our environment. And literally, if we allow the environment to control us, we're not really creating our own movie. But then you talk about God's purpose for our lives and what's going to happen. How many times do you find that people rely on God, and when something happens in their life, well, that's what God meant it to be, rather than accepting responsibility and realizing that every action and decision we make has consequences? And how do you equate the two so people understand that, yes, he loves us and he wants the best for us. And as we look at the synchronicities that happen in our lives, yes, that is a tremendous blessing. But at the same time, don't get caught into that situation of, well, this is what God meant to be. And this is what happened. And this is what happened. And it's all about God. How do you equate that?
That's a really good question because that reminds me of the blame, and in fact on one of my podcast episodes I said we all have to fire our ego at some point, right? And one of the things that ego loves to do is he wants to blame somebody, whether it's going to be God or somebody else in any of our situations. And it's one of those patterns that we will get into, is that when something goes wrong, I got to find somebody outside of myself to blame. What if you take responsibility for everything in your life and why you are where you are at this moment? And I really encourage everyone to begin to think of that and begin to understand that you always had a choice. You had a choice to do different things at different times in your life. And whether or not you were influenced by something or not, whether it was an environment or a person or whatever it was, you still, in the end, made the choice. And when you make these choices, we are the creators of where we end up and where we are in life. And I try to have a conversation of just saying, if we can accept the responsibility that I am a creator, that I can do many of the things that have already been put and laid out for me to do I need to blame anything or anyone else for where I am at this moment? And the answer becomes no when you really do accept that, hey, where I'm at right now, I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. There are things that happen. There are people we hurt. Can you come to grips and confront that in your life? And when you do that, I believe that you can then really enjoy the great things of this world and in this life, and understand that I can't blame anything else other than myself. And when I take that responsibility on, I can then begin to make a change in my life. I can begin to create in a different way. I can then begin to serve in a different way than I've ever done before.
So when we talk about the integration of that spiritual growth into our everyday life, is it really what you were just talking about, the prayer, the meditation, the decisions we make, or are there some other aspects that you talk about in your book, that how do we really integrate what we call that spiritual life, which is really the goodness that really exists in us and the godliness that really exists within each of us, if we allow it?
Yeah, if we allow it. I would say that I'll go back to when I was a young boy. I played many sports, and I played baseball. I was really good at baseball. I really liked baseball. And I played basketball. And basketball ended up being the heart of things, but then I ended up being height challenged. So by the time I got to high school, by 10th grade, everybody passed me. But one of the things I learned when I played sports was that I had to practice. And this is something that I learned, that the more I practiced, the better I got at dribbling, shooting. If it was hitting the baseball, the more I practiced, the easier it became. The more I practiced, the more habitual something became. And it's interesting that if we want to be good or great at anything in our lives, we really need to have, number one, the discipline to show up. Number two, the ability to practice on a consistent basis. And I will put this in there because in order to integrate your spiritual growth into your life, you have to be intentional about it. You have to be willing to have discipline with it, and you have to be willing to practice on a consistent basis And what I find that is many people see it maybe as an afterthought, but if you put it as in the forefront of what you do, then you can integrate it into your daily life. Using some of the tools and techniques we talked about earlier, you will practice and you will have discipline to do it on a consistent basis. And it's the same thing with our bodies, right? If we want to have a better, healthier body, then we need to be doing practices and disciplines that will consistently give us what we are looking to do. And so my encouragement is, priority one is put your spiritual joy and your peace and your love as one of the forefronts of your life, and intentionally say, I'm going to practice, whether it's going to be prayer, meditation. If you can add journaling, I encourage it to consistently become and touch that part of you that's inside of you. I reference the tripart being, some reference it as we can be 4-part beings, but I'll say 3. And the 3 would be spirit, soul, and body. The body has our 5 senses. The soul is where our mind, will, and emotions reside. And the spirit is what you were innately born with from your creator. And if you focus on saying, I'm going to connect with that spirit, I'm going to connect with that on a consistent basis through prayer, through meditation and journaling, and you're going to practice that every day, And I don't encourage you to say, I'm just going to do, 3 hours. No, start off with a minute, start off with 5 minutes, and, go up a little bit at a time until you get to a space you're comfortable with and that you're practicing it. But I will say you will have a greater experience of integrating that into everything that you have. And the goal is that we are no longer flowing from the outside in, and where everything outside of us begins to affect our actions, our behaviors, and what we do, but we begin to flow from the inside out, where then we are having that joy, that peace, that love that continues to show up in everything we do. You just show up in the room and everyone is like, wow, something's different.
So here's the question as we get a little bit closer to the end. One of the things that you talked about is the ego. Okay. And oftentimes all of our decisions are caused by our ego, which is not a healthy thing to do. Then you talk about making decisions from the heart. How do you, and very quickly on this one, how do you help people to go from ego to heart in their decision making?
I tell a story. I love telling stories. When I was younger, I loved to tune into a radio station that was probably about 100 miles away. And we had the tuners with the knobs. Like today, we have all the digital stuff today, but it was a tuner with the knob. And if I would tune it just right, I could get that station and I would dance my heart away. And it's the same thing with our heart. Our heart, we have the ability to tune in to our heart and listen to our heart on a consistent basis. And some of it comes through us practicing to listen to that heart. And the reason I talk about it is that we all have this gut brain or intuition. Science has already told us that it's already there. And an example of that happens in my life is I'm driving down the road and I know I'm going fast and I see blue lights come up. Before I can ever think about what's actually happening, I have a reaction in my body that goes, and I don't know if the blue lights are for me or not, but that's happening throughout your life. In all situations, you already have some innate something that's already alerting you. If you connect to that, and that's your heart, and that's what's actually who you are speaking to you, we want to then start to be listening to our heart instead of our head. So instead of the ego, I would say our head. And our heart can then inform our head what we want to do, because we have to have some type of thinking that provides us action and behaviors into this world. So my goal would say, tune in to that innate gut brain intuition that we've already said, science has already said you have. Let that start to be your guide. And you have to be able to connect with that on a daily basis through your practices and through your disciplines.
Love it. Well, we're coming to a close. How do people find your book and how do they find you?
You can find me at randyadkinsjr.com. And you also find my book, Produce on Purpose, Experience Life Being the Real You. There you will also find information about my podcast. You will find information about sermons, videos, other interviews, and really about living this life in a great, joyful way. So randyadkinsjr.com, there you will find it. And for this podcast, I will take 25% off of anyone that wants a signed copy of my book off of my website. And if you put in the coupon code INSPIRED.
I love it. I love it. Randy, thanks so much. I really appreciate you being on the show, and I really appreciate your insights. I think that so often people don't just sit and think about some of the things that you've talked about.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And I really love sharing this information for anyone to be able to really digest and be able to live a greater life.
Well, that is great. And folks, thanks for listening. Hope you really enjoyed it. We look forward to having you join us again soon. And this is Dr. Doug saying namaste.